It often begins quietly, without warning, a moment that looks ordinary enough until something slips, just slightly, out of place. A sound arrives too early. A shadow lingers too long. A person appears where no one should be. History, when read carefully, is filled with these small fractures, instances where the world seems to hesitate, as if reconsidering its own rules. For most of human history, we have trusted the solidity of things. Stone remains stone. Distance demands time. Gravity pulls downward without exception. These assumptions form the scaffolding of daily life, so deeply ingrained that we rarely notice them at all. Yet every so often, a story emerges that refuses to sit comfortably within that framework. Not myths exactly, not miracles either, but accounts that linger in official records, personal testimony, and collective memory, asking to be acknowledged without demanding belief. What if reality is not as seamless as it appears? What if the universe, like any complex system, occasionally misfires, not dramatically but subtly, leaving behind moments that cannot be fully explained or easily dismissed? These are not tales of monsters or prophecies. They are quieter, stranger than that. They involve ordinary people, familiar places, and events that unfold not with spectacle, but with an unsettling calm. A guard blinks and finds himself continents away. A town awakens to find gravity behaving as if it has forgotten its role. A single day repeats itself, not once or twice, but dozens of times, trapping consciousness while the world resets around it. Elsewhere, people encounter versions of themselves walking the same streets, performing the same actions, separated by seconds or meters, as if copied and pasted by mistake. These stories are unsettling not because they are frightening, but because they are systematic. They follow patterns. Boundaries appear where none should exist. Durations end with mechanical precision. Effects remain contained within invisible borders, as if governed by rules we do not yet understand, or are not meant to see. For centuries, unexplained events were framed as divine intervention or supernatural intrusion. In the modern age, we tend to reach for different metaphors. We speak of systems, processes, errors. We compare reality to software, time to memory, space to data. These metaphors do not claim truth, they offer language. A way to discuss anomalies without surrendering to fantasy or dismissing wonder. This series is not an argument. It is an invitation. An invitation to slow down and examine moments when certainty falters, when witnesses agree on what they saw, but science hesitates. When documentation exists, yet explanations remain provisional. Each story stands on its own, grounded in testimony and record, yet open-ended by necessity. As we move forward, we will not ask whether these events prove anything definitive about the nature of existence. That question may be too large, too rigid. Instead, we will ask something smaller and perhaps more human. What do these moments reveal about our relationship with reality itself? About memory, perception, and the fragile confidence with which we move through the world. If reality were a vast and intricate system, natural or otherwise, then imperfections would not be signs of failure, but of complexity. And perhaps these strange, fleeting disruptions are not warnings at all, but reminders. That certainty is a comfort we construct. That the universe, however it is built, still holds room for mystery. The stories that follow do not ask you to believe. They ask you to listen, to sit with uncertainty, and to consider the possibility that beneath the smooth surface of everyday life, something far more intricate and far less settled may be quietly at work. It began with a blink. October 3, 1593. The tropical heat of Manila pressed against the stone walls of the governor's palace. Spanish guard Gil Perez stood at his post, uniform crisp, musket by his side, eyes fixed on the courtyard. Then a sudden wave of dizziness. He blinked, and when he opened his eyes, he was in Mexico City. The sun was different, the air thinner. 1,000 voices rang through the Plaza Mayor, and the spires around him were unfamiliar. His musket was still slung over his shoulder, his uniform still bore the seal of the Philippines. But the world had shifted in a way he couldn't explain. Moments later, local authorities arrested the dazed soldier, assuming he was a deserter, a madman, or a spy. But Gil Perez spoke clearly, calmly. He named the Manila governor who had just been assassinated, a fact no one in Mexico could have known yet. Months passed. When the next ship from the Philippines finally arrived, it confirmed every detail Perez had claimed: the assassination, his disappearance, his service record, even his last known location, standing guard before he vanished into thin air. The Spanish Inquisition, ever thorough in its suspicion, conducted interviews, examined records, and consulted witnesses on both sides of the Pacific. The conclusion was not a conviction, nor a miracle. It was something else entirely. A transportation that defied the laws of nature. No evidence of fraud, no trace of madness. Just a man displaced without cause or mechanism. But what Perez described was even stranger than his physical relocation. He said it felt as though reality had paused, like a page caught between turns. He saw Manila and Mexico at once, overlapping like reflections on opposite sides of glass. He felt as though he'd stepped through a door that briefly opened between distant rooms. Modern researchers have studied his journey with new tools: satellite maps, geometry, and theoretical physics. The path between Manila and Mexico City, they note, forms an arc, a perfect great circle route across the globe. Not random, but mathematical, precise, as if the universe had navigated coordinates the way a machine might copy a file between folders. It's tempting to dismiss it as folklore, a colonial-era oddity embroidered by centuries of retelling. But the paperwork exists. The testimonies remain. The incident is preserved not in whispered legends, but in the bureaucratic records of two imperial cities, separated by ocean and time. What makes the story linger is not just the act of teleportation, but the precision of it. Perez arrived intact, memory unshaken, weapon in hand, as though the universe made no error in moving him, only in the fact that it moved him at all. Was this a cosmic glitch? A moment where the operating system of reality skipped a line of code? Or was it something else, something not meant for us to understand? A function usually hidden, briefly exposed? We think of space as continuous and time as linear. But what if they aren't? What if there are back doors, shortcuts, or maintenance corridors that usually remain locked? The Gil Perez event raises more than questions of distance. It challenges the very structure of reality. Is the world as solid as it seems, or are we all, at some level, just positions on a map that can be changed by forces beyond our perception? And if one man can be moved like a line of data, what does that make the rest of us? Static? Memory? Or something more fragile still? At 10:47 a.m. on a warm August morning in 1969, Taos, New Mexico became untethered from gravity. It began with a sheet of laundry dropped by Maria Santos in her backyard. Instead of falling, the damp fabric rose gently into the air. She stood frozen, watching it drift upward like a feather in slow motion. Within minutes, reports flooded the police station. Forks hovering above kitchen tables, dogs bounding impossibly high, children laughing as they floated over rooftops. For exactly 17 minutes, the laws of physics in Taos simply stopped applying. A town fountain erupted in chaotic spirals, water spraying upward in refusal to descend. Cars were tied down with chains to keep them from drifting away. An archaeology documentary crew filming nearby captured surreal footage: floating leaves, drifting newspapers. A cameraman reaching into the air to retrieve his equipment as it tried to escape his grip. You can hear his bewildered voice on the tape. What the hell is happening? And then, just as suddenly, it ended. At 11:04 a.m., everything fell. Dishes, bicycles, tree branches, and people plummeted to the ground in unison. Injuries were minor, but the psychological impact ran deep. It was as if the town had briefly entered a dream, a lucid moment when reality hesitated. The anomaly was precise, a perfect circle, 2 miles in radius, centered on the Taos Plaza. Outside the boundary, gravity held firm. Inside, it is softened to just 15% of a normal strength, like the surface of the moon. Physicist Dr. Richard Morrison, coincidentally visiting the area, conducted makeshift tests and confirmed the phenomenon. He found objects fell, but slowly, almost gracefully. Government officials arrived within hours, sealing away much of the footage and silencing the coverage. Their explanations ranged from seismic oddities to mass hallucination, but nothing accounted for the physical evidence. The bruises, the broken glass, the bent stop signs from their sudden return to Earth. What made the gravity holiday, as locals came to call it, so unnerving wasn't just its impossibility. It was its orderliness. The circular boundary, the exact 17-minute duration, the measured reduction in force. This wasn't chaos. It was calculation. If gravity is a constant, an unbreakable rule, then its failure, even for a moment, suggests something deeper, that the laws we believe immutable are in fact variable, adjustable, like settings in a program. Parameters in a simulation. What kind of system allows for such a change? Who, or what, flipped that switch? We often imagine natural laws as eternal truths, but events like this one whisper a different story. They suggest those laws might be protocols, usually locked, sometimes overwritten, and if gravity can be disabled, even briefly, what else might be optional? In the weeks that followed, Taos returned to normal. Children went back to school. Streets were swept. The incident faded into the background of desert myths and half-remembered stories. But for those who were there, the sky never looked quite the same, because for 17 minutes they saw what it meant for the ground to let go. And once you've floated in a world that forgot to pull you down, it's hard not to wonder, what other rules are waiting to be rewritten? It started like any other Tuesday. March 15, 2011. Jennifer Kumar awoke to the buzz of her alarm clock at 6:23 a.m. The sky outside was pale, her radio played a familiar song, and her morning commute unfolded with practiced routine. But something felt too familiar. Déjà vu, she thought, until it happened again and again and again. Jennifer Kumar lived the same day 47 times. At first, she assumed stress or a strange dream was to blame. But as the loops repeated, each time beginning with her alarm and ending at midnight, she began to track the details. The same phone calls, the same car crash on 9th Street, the same overheard joke at the office. The world played like a record stuck on a single groove, perfectly repeating itself while only she remained aware. By the 12th iteration, Kumar tested the boundaries. She placed anonymous calls to the police, warning them of the exact time and location of the coming traffic accident. When her prediction proved true down to the second, they listened. And when it happened again the next day, identical in every detail, they began to believe. Each loop left her more informed, more skilled. She learned Italian. She memorized books. She conducted experiments. While time outside reset, her consciousness moved forward, a single thread through a world stitched into stasis. Then came the 23rd loop, when she contacted Dr. Sarah Chen, a local physics professor with a reputation for open-minded inquiry. Chen helped her record and analyze the anomaly. They measured the repetition's boundaries, tested causality, and tracked micro-variations. And yet, the loops held. But the strangest revelation came on loop 31. Kumar discovered she could manipulate time within the loop. If she focused hard enough, she could stretch a single hour into what felt like an afternoon. Her lunch break expanded while the clock ticked just minutes. Time, it seemed, was not only repeating, it was pliable. By loop 45, she encountered another, Frank Rodriguez, an elderly man who, like her, had become aware of the pattern. He'd been stuck for 3 loops and was terrified. Together they pieced together a pattern. The anomaly was expanding. More people were becoming conscious within the loop. The simulation, if that's what it was fraying at the edges. On the 47th iteration, Jennifer and Frank attempted a final test, an alignment of actions, carefully coordinated and synchronized to reset the loop, and it worked. Jennifer awoke to Wednesday, March 16th. The spell was broken, but the memories remained. So did the data. Dr. Chen's analysis suggested something shocking. The structure of time in the anomaly behaved like a corrupted program, endlessly reloading a save point until corrected. A feedback loop in a system too complex to fail cleanly. If time is linear, this should be impossible. But if time is coded, if reality is a program, then a repeating day is not only possible, it's a predictable outcome of a broken subroutine. What does it mean to live the same day over and over? To retain memory when the world forgets? Jennifer Kumar's experience is more than an anomaly. It's a mirror showing us that time may not flow as we think, but buffer, reset, and loop like a system trying to fix itself. And if it happened once, could it happen again? Or worse, could it be happening now, unnoticed by everyone but a few? It was an ordinary summer day in Milbrook, Illinois, until people began seeing themselves. On June 12, 2003, a local librarian named Rebecca Martinez glanced out her window and saw herself walking by. Same clothes, same gait, same everything. Confused, she rushed outside, only to find her duplicate already shelving books back inside the library, exactly as she herself had been doing moments before. What followed was 6 days of collective cognitive dissonance. Across the quiet town, residents encountered perfect replicas of themselves, not just lookalikes, not cousins or costumes. These were precise duplicates, identical voices, gestures, memories, even scars. They answered to the same names, knew the same childhood stories. Some even shared emotional reactions in real time. Tom Bradley saw his copy mowing a lawn a few blocks away, while his original self stood in disbelief, watching the motion mirrored with eerie accuracy. Sarah Winston found herself shopping alongside herself. They picked the same items, reached for the same box of cereal, apologized to each other simultaneously. Scientists who arrived to study the event confirmed the impossible. The duplicates were biologically identical. Same DNA, same fingerprints. Thermal scans confirmed body heat. Their presence couldn't be explained away as hallucination or hoax. But what baffled everyone most was the delay, 4.7 seconds. Every action performed by a person was echoed by their double with a 4.7-second lag. Raise a hand and your duplicate would follow. Speak, and your words echoed back just a breath behind. The synchronization was perfect, as if 2 playback reels were running slightly out of phase. It wasn't just people, either. Surveillance footage revealed that the duplicates appeared in the exact places their originals had been, exactly 24 hours prior. A form of reality echo, repeating cached data like a glitch in a rendering engine. Dr. Michael Ross, a quantum physicist brought in from Northwestern University, proposed a radical theory. The town had become stuck in a kind of temporal buffer. Instead of time flowing cleanly, it was replaying snapshots, creating a doubled reality, like frames overlapping in a film reel. Attempts to move duplicates far from their originals led to disorientation and memory loss. The system, whatever it was, seemed to enforce a tether between each pair. It tolerated overlap, but not divergence. Then, after 6 days, the duplicates vanished. Witnesses describe them flickering like static before dissolving into pixels, as if reality, having noticed the error, quietly deleted the redundant files. Government agents arrived. The town was studied, compartmentalized, and sanitized. Some residents were relocated, but leaked documents later revealed this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar duplication events had occurred in other Midwestern towns, always lasting 6 days, always with the same 4.7-second delay. What do we make of a world where people can be copied, not cloned, but rendered, replayed, as if they were code? What does it say about the nature of memory, identity, or even free will if two people can exist with the same mind, acting in harmony like mirrored processes? The Milbrook event suggests something chilling, that our existence may be less singular than we believe, that we too might be iterations of ourselves, updated daily, existing in harmony with versions long since overwritten. And if a system can render us twice, what happens when it forgets which version is real? At 30,000 feet above the Earth, Flight 447 glided smoothly through a clear September sky. Captain David Chen, a veteran pilot with thousands of hours in the cockpit, adjusted course slightly en route from Seattle to Los Angeles. It was a routine flight until something impossible appeared through the windshield. There, floating motionless above the clouds, was land, not a cloud formation or mirage. A landmass the size of Manhattan, complete with forests, buildings, smoke from chimneys, and figures moving about. It hovered in open air, suspended with no visible support, casting a sharp shadow on the cloud deck below. Chen blinked, rubbed his eyes, rechecked instruments. But the island remained, floating like a forgotten fragment of Earth, dislodged and drifting. Passengers noticed too. Soon, whispers grew into shouts. Binoculars passed from hand to hand. Flight attendant Lisa Parker later described seeing a medieval village with narrow streets and people walking calmly, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, that they were adrift in the sky. One person was seen waving at the aircraft. Chen reported the sighting immediately, but radar showed nothing. The object didn't exist, at least not electronically. Still, photographs and video from passengers captured it with disturbing clarity. Trees swaying in an unseen breeze, stone buildings weathered by time, and what looked like cultivated farmland. The decision to veer closer was quick. At 2 miles out, the details sharpened. Roads, roofs, people turning their heads to look at the plane. Then, just as military interceptors approached to investigate, the island vanished. Not in a burst or with noise, but instantly. One moment, it was there. The next, empty sky. Flight 447's instruments. 2 had gone haywire during the sighting, recording multiple altitudes and locations simultaneously. As soon as the island disappeared, the glitches stopped. Later analysis of the videos showed no tampering. The island was there. The cast shadows proved depth. The atmospheric distortion around its edges hinted at self-contained weather patterns. It wasn't an illusion. It had mass. It had presence. And then it was gone. The FAA classified the case. The military issued denials. But whispers circulated among pilots. Rumors of other floating landmasses seen over oceans or deserts, always appearing briefly, always vanishing without explanation. What kind of reality allows for a floating island? Not just levitating matter, but a functioning ecosystem suspended midair, invisible to radar, yet visible to the naked eye. If our universe is a simulation, this was a rendering error, an object loaded into the wrong layer of the visual field, a background asset pushed into the foreground, or worse, an entire level that slipped between dimensions and briefly overlapped with our own. Could it be an alternate version of Earth, a preview, a test environment, or something from a future or past state of the simulation? We don't know, but the people on that island saw the plane. They looked back. They noticed, which raises the most unsettling question of all. If our reality can intersect with another, even briefly, What might be watching us from the other side? December 14th, 2005. New York City pulsed with its usual rhythm. Crowds pouring through Grand Central Terminal, the marble floors echoing with footsteps, announcements, and hurried lives. Then John Stevenson walked through a wall. Dozens saw it. A man approaching a solid marble pillar and not stopping. His body passed through as if the stone were vapor. He emerged on the other side unharmed, dazed, and unaware that anything unusual had occurred. Security footage captured the moment with chilling clarity. 1 second, flesh meeting stone. The next, a seamless transition, like a ghost passing through fog. Stevenson didn't run. He didn't scream. He simply turned, confused by the stunned expressions around him. Officer Maria Rodriguez, standing just feet away, was the first to reach him. She confirmed. He was solid, breathing, normal. Yet everyone around had witnessed the same violation of reality. Later, Stevenson described the sensation as moving through gelatin. Thick, slow, but permeable. Inside the pillar, he said, he could see its internal structure, the steel reinforcements, the veins in the marble, as though the solid world had momentarily become transparent. Physicists reviewed the footage. No visual tampering, no edits, no plausible trick. Dr. Patricia Kim of Columbia University noted that Stevenson's body appeared to share space with the pillar for 2.3 seconds. This violates the Pauli exclusion principle, she stated. Two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time, but they did. Medical tests on Stevenson came back normal. No trauma, no anomalies, except for one. Sensitive electromagnetic instruments detected strange energy fields around his body, subtle but consistent, as if his molecular structure had been temporarily altered. Most disturbing of all was what followed. In the days after the incident, Stevenson reported feeling tethered to the pillar. He could sense it even when blocks away. A faint hum, a presence, like part of him had never left. Quantum entanglement, one researcher suggested, his particles still linked to the column he passed through. Maintenance workers came forward with reports. For weeks before the event, that particular pillar had acted oddly. Tools vibrated near it. The marble felt soft to the touch. Instruments showed unexplained energy fluctuations. After Stevenson's passage, witnesses claimed the pillar sometimes flickered, appeared translucent, or shimmered like a low-resolution hologram. The area was cordoned off. The footage was archived. The story was buried. But the implications remain. If a human being can phase through solid matter, even once, what does it say about the nature of solidity? About the walls we assume are fixed? Perhaps what we experience as solid is only a rendered illusion, graphics wrapped around probability. And once in a while, the system forgets to enforce the boundaries. The Stevenson incident is not about a man with powers. It's about a world that flickered. For a brief moment, the code behind the curtain revealed itself. A wall became a passage. A pillar became a doorway. And a city, for just a heartbeat, became aware of how fragile its physics really are. What else might we walk through if we stop believing it's impossible? At 3:17 a.m. on November 8, 2012, the town of Cedar Falls, Iowa, quietly rewound itself. There were no alarms, no explosions, no flickering lights, just a subtle, total reset. Entire buildings reconstructed themselves. Streets reverted, paint returned to previous colors. Everything, down to the smallest detail, matched the exact state of the town 24 hours earlier. It began at the hospital. Night staff arrived to find a wing, demolished the day before, standing intact. Beds were made. Medical equipment was positioned just as it had been. The wear on the floor tiles was identical. Files in drawers were no longer updated, but matched the records from a day prior. As dawn broke, the rest of the town awoke to find reality had quietly undone itself. Graffiti disappeared. Roadwork reappeared mid-progress. A house freshly painted green was suddenly blue again, chemically analyzed to match the aging and weathering of the original coat. Local digital records rolled back. Files created on November 7th vanished. Edits reverted. Timestamps confirmed. The overwrite occurred precisely at 3:17 a.m. City officials were baffled. Residents were shaken. Even injuries were undone. One boy, who had broken his arm falling off his bike that afternoon, now showed no signs of trauma. His X-rays from the previous day matched his new, unbroken state. A temporal physicist, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, led the investigation. Her conclusion was as unsettling as it was precise. Cedar Falls had been restored from a backup. "It's as if reality keeps save points," she wrote, and someone hit reload. The reset affected only what was within city limits. A construction project along the border with Waterloo, the neighboring town, was partially undone, right along a clean, invisible line. One side existed in the past. The other remained in the present. It was not the first time. Classified reports revealed similar resets had occurred in other small towns across the Midwest, always at 3:17 a.m., always reversing exactly 24 hours of time. These were not hallucinations. They left physical evidence. Witnesses, photos, mismatched documents, all aligned to a world that had been edited without consent. Why 24 hours? Why that exact time? The answers remain elusive. The implications, however, are staggering. If a town can be restored like a document on a hard drive, then perhaps all reality is version-controlled. Perhaps the present is not a river but a file system, mutable, savable, and, when necessary, rewindable. Was it a correction, a rollback after an error, or a test of a system feature we were never meant to see? For the people of Cedar Falls, it was something more intimate, the violation of continuity, a glimpse at the scaffolding of their world, a reminder that change, pain, growth, even time can be undone. But what happens to the version that was erased? Where did the lost day go? Did it cease to exist? Or does it persist somewhere, like a discarded draft, still flickering in some digital ether? And if our lives can be reset without warning, how many times has it already happened? How would we know? At precisely 2:30 p.m. on April 22, 2008, downtown Bakersfield, California, began to look like unfinished code. It started with a flicker. Maria Santos, walking past the Kern County Museum, noticed the building's facade shift. One moment solid, the next a translucent grid. Within minutes, an entire 4-block radius had transformed into something surreal. Buildings rendered as wireframe models, streets as transparent scaffolds, and cars as skeletal diagrams of motion. It looked like a video game that had failed to load its textures. Photographer Alex Chen happened to be in the area. He captured what no one could later explain: intersecting planes of transparent glass-like walls, buildings appearing as floating architectural blueprints, and people themselves flickering into partial wireframes. You could see the bones of passers-by, their circulatory systems glowing faintly like red and blue neon, anatomically precise and hauntingly alien. Yet the world still worked. People walked through walls that looked like wire meshes. Doors opened. Elevators ran. The objects behaved as expected, even if their appearance no longer matched reality. It wasn't a hallucination. Dozens of cameras captured it. Chen's photos were verified as authentic. And what they revealed was deeply unsettling. The geometry of the world laid bare, a temporary collapse of visual rendering that exposed the raw mathematical structure behind everything. Dr. Robert Kim, a computer graphics expert from UC Berkeley, reviewed the images. "These follow standard 3D modeling conventions," he said. "Vertices, vectors, untextured meshes, exactly what you'd see in an early-stage render of a virtual environment. What disturbed him most was the organization. The glitch spread outward in perfect concentric circles from the museum, like a systematic loading sequence. Complex structures were simplified first, then streetlights, then pedestrians. The effect lasted 47 minutes. Then, without transition, the world returned to normal, solid, colored, familiar, as if the graphics processor of reality had finally caught up. But some things lingered. Hidden structures revealed during the glitch didn't match known blueprints. Certain buildings showed internal chambers that weren't supposed to exist. Some wireframe bodies displayed unfamiliar networks of nerves and vessels not documented in human anatomy. This wasn't just a rendering failure, it was a revelation. A peek behind the curtain. A reminder that what we see may be nothing more than a polished output, surface drawn over logic, design over data. A world not born but built, and occasionally prone to exposing its scaffolding. The Bakersfield incident forces us to ask, what is vision? What are we truly seeing when we look at the world? Are we perceiving reality or merely the final render? And if so, what lies beneath the layer we're never meant to notice? It began without warning, like a system quietly clearing space. On July 7, 2016, shoppers at the Riverside Mall in Phoenix, Arizona, watched as reality began to vanish, systematically, efficiently, and with chilling precision. It started in a cosmetics store. Lipsticks, mirrors, displays, entire shelves, simply faded out of existence, not shattered, not stolen, just gone. Objects dissolved edge to center, like assets being deleted from a computer screen. Then it spread. Chairs disappeared from the food court, benches from the atrium. Light fixtures, posters, planters, everything non-essential began to vanish, piece by piece. Security guard Robert Martinez stood frozen as a fountain evaporated mid-splash. The water vanished first, then the stone. The floor beneath rearranged itself, tiles shifting to fill the absence without any visible mechanism. He later described the feeling as watching someone hit backspace on reality. Then, people began to disappear. A woman browsing shoes was there one moment, gone the next. No scream, no sound, just an empty space where she'd been. Others vanished mid-conversation. No one filed missing persons reports. No one could even remember who was gone. Security footage confirmed the impossibility. People were present in one frame and missing the next. But their absence left no hole in memory, only a vague sense of subtraction. Dr. Angela Foster, a quantum physicist from Arizona State University, arrived within the hour. She began mapping the disappearance patterns, and what she found was disturbingly logical. The deletions followed a hierarchy. First, non-essential items, then duplicate items, then redundant structures, then background individuals. The system, it seemed, was optimizing, exactly like a computer managing memory. Foster's team noticed another pattern. The disappearances followed a grid. Objects vanished in square clusters, like sectors on a hard drive being wiped. And with each deletion, reality adjusted seamlessly to fill the void. Floor plans realigned, traffic patterns corrected, signage changed as if the missing entities had never existed. The event lasted just under 3 hours. By 2:17 p.m., the deletions stopped. Roughly 40% of the mall's content, physical and human, was gone, but what remained was eerily coherent. Inventory databases updated to exclude deleted merchandise, store layouts adjusted in digital records. Financial documents showed no trace of what was lost. It was as if the entire mall had been rewritten retroactively with a lighter footprint. No one could agree on what had been removed. The despawn event, as it came to be called, suggested a terrifying possibility, that our reality has memory constraints. that in moments of stress or overload, it deletes to preserve performance. Not emotionally, not with malice, just procedurally. And what is more haunting, the deletions, or the fact that reality adapted without resistance. No glitches, no outcry, no break in continuity. Just absence. Which begs the question, how many times has this happened before, and what have we already forgotten? March 3, 2019, Burlington, Vermont. It was a cold, clear morning when Emma Rodriguez began to notice something strange. People on Church Street were repeating themselves. A man in a suit checked his watch at the same corner every 12 minutes, always muttering the same words under his breath. A woman stopped at the same storefront window and made identical comments about the price of scarves. An elderly man fed pigeons with robotic precision, same handful, same toss, same pause. Emma thought it might be a prank, until she realized it wasn't just a few people. It was hundreds. For 6 days, approximately 200 residents of Burlington moved and spoke like characters in a video game, non-player characters, or NPCs, caught in scripted loops. They walked predefined routes that never intersected. Their gestures were precise, their phrases repeated with mechanical rhythm. Some blinked at timed intervals. Others responded to questions with canned dialogue. "I'm just going about my day," or "What do you mean?" And they meant it. To observers, it was eerie. To the affected, it wasn't even noticeable. Dr. Sarah Chen, a behavioral psychologist from the University of Vermont, led the investigation. Her EEG tests revealed something disturbing. The NPC individuals had normal brain activity, but their neural rhythms were in near-perfect sync, unlike anything observed in natural brain states. The glitch wasn't just behavioral. It was neurological. Surveillance footage showed movement patterns that avoided collision as if guided by invisible code. NPCs never bumped into each other, even in crowded spaces. When tracked on a map, their routes resembled circuit boards, clean, ordered, and eerily efficient. Attempts to break the pattern failed. One man, confronted with a video of himself repeating actions every 10 minutes, simply blinked and replied, "I don't know what you mean." And then he resumed the loop. The glitch ended as suddenly as it began. On the 7th day, the affected residents awoke as if nothing had happened. Their memories of the past week were foggy at best, missing hours, fractured timelines, unexplained gaps. But something else had changed. Their EEG patterns had returned to normal, but with slight anomalies, neural signatures that had never existed before, as if a subroutine had been installed, then quietly disabled. Government agencies classified the findings, but rumors of similar events, always in college towns, always affecting a small percentage of the population, began to surface. Was this a glitch in consciousness, a memory leak in reality's software, or a stress test of the system itself? What the Burlington incident suggests is profound, that under certain conditions human beings can become automated, that the illusion of free will can be temporarily suspended, replaced by behavior trees and dialogue loops. It raises an unsettling question. How often do we act on scripts we don't realize are running? And if some part of us can be overwritten, who or what holds the access? Sometimes the veil lifts all at once. In the early hours of the morning, a single line connects the impossible, a soldier who blinked across oceans, a town that forgot gravity, a day that would not end. One might be an oddity, two a coincidence, but 10 distinct moments when reality slipped, buckled, or forgot itself. These are not campfire stories. They are documented, witnessed, filmed. Anomalies, yes, but not accidents. Each of the 10 glitches we've explored bears a strange similarity to computer errors, not random chaos, but systematic malfunctions. The soldier's precise teleportation like a data transfer across fixed coordinates. The 17-minute gravity loss in Taos confined to a perfect circle, like a targeted parameter change. A day repeated 47 times, not distorted but perfectly preserved, as if the file failed to save. Duplicate people acting in sync, bound by a 4.7-second lag, like lagged copies rendered from cache. A floating island, seen by dozens, behaving like a misloaded asset. A man phasing through a wall, not disappearing but stepping through solid matter, as if the collision detection had been disabled. A town rolled back to a prior save state. A 4-block rendering collapse into wireframes. A mall systematically deleting its contents. People behaving like NPCs, each one an error. But not in mythic terms, in technical ones, and that is what lingers. These aren't violations of magic or hauntings from another realm. They feel designed, computed, executed, then undone. What kind of reality behaves this way? If we had no computers, no simulations, no code, perhaps we'd still call them miracles or madness. But now we have the metaphors. We speak in systems. We recognize buffers, loops, processing lags, and reality, at times, mimics those behaviors too well to ignore. Perhaps our universe is not broken, but built. Perhaps it doesn't run like software. Perhaps it is software. The implications stretch beyond physics or philosophy. They touch on the deeply human, memory, agency, time. If reality can forget itself, so can we. If the world can be reset, copied, deleted, what does that say about permanence? About death? About choice? And yet, perhaps this isn't cause for fear. Perhaps these glitches are not failures, but glimpses. Moments when the curtain slips just enough to reveal the structure behind the play. Not to terrify us, but to remind us we understand less than we think. That mystery is still real. That certainty was always an illusion. In a universe that flickers and loops, where time rewinds and matter behaves like memory, we are left with a strange kind of faith, not in order, but in curiosity. Because if this is a simulation, then the greatest gift is not discovering its boundaries. It's the chance to notice them at all, to ask questions, to wonder who, if anyone, is watching us notice, and to keep walking forward one rendered step at a time into a world still full of beautiful, breathtaking glitches. September 23, 1997, 30,000 feet above sea level. Captain David Chen's flight was cruising steadily through calm skies when the impossible appeared, a floating landmass, complete with forests, roads, and buildings, hovering above the clouds like a misplaced continent. Passengers saw it. Photographs were taken. People pointed, gasped, waved, and then it was gone. We return to this moment now, because in light of the other glitches we've explored, its meaning deepens. The floating island isn't just a surreal anomaly. It's a metaphor for everything else we've seen, a misplaced element, a rendered object in the wrong layer of reality. Like scenery from a parallel instance of Earth, briefly overlapping with our own. This pattern is consistent. The more we examine these incidents, the more we find not chaos, but logic, an eerie form of digital reasoning. Glitches occur in clean time frames, 6 days, 47 minutes, precisely 3:17 a.m. Boundaries are circular. Effects are localized. Reset events only affect city limits. NPC loops obey collision rules. Every glitch adheres to constraints, like lines of code operating within a structured program. We are taught to think of nature as wild, chaotic, organic. But this is procedural. And now, the reports are increasing. More floating islands seen, more reset towns. The duplication events are spreading. Burlington wasn't the last place where people slipped into script. So, what is happening? Is the system breaking down? Are these bugs in a decaying simulation? Or are they maintenance routines, backups, reboots, compression protocols run by a caretaker we cannot see? There's a darker possibility, too, that these glitches aren't flaws at all, that they're tests, calibrations, experiments to observe how we respond. A building flickers. Do we notice? A man disappears. Do we ask? A town resets. Do we remember? Or do we, like the simulation itself, adapt and overwrite? In each case, the world continues. Life moves forward. Reality repairs itself. But the question lingers, unerasable. If the code of the world is visible, however briefly, what else lies hidden beneath the surface we trust so blindly? We thought the Earth was flat. Then we thought it was the center of the universe. Then we thought it ran on fixed physical laws. Now we wonder if it runs on logic gates and data tables. The story of the floating island, then, is not just about something seen in the sky. It's about a world whose foundation may be not stone or atoms, but design. And if so, who is designing it? And are they still watching? The final thread is not an answer. It's a question still forming. We began with a soldier who vanished and reappeared across an ocean. We moved through a town where gravity took a holiday, a day that repeated 47 times. People duplicated like copied files, an island that hovered in the sky, and walls walked through as though made of smoke. We saw towns reset, buildings flicker into wireframes, malls despawn like overfilled memory banks, and minds collapse into NPC scripts. Each story whispered something unsettling, that reality is not immune to error. And yet the true mystery is not in the events themselves, but in how neatly they align, how precise the glitches are, how familiar they feel, not mystical, not random, but systematic, programmed. We are conditioned to see the world as solid, permanent, physical. But what if it's not? What if existence is more like software? What if the grass, the sky, your very memories are structured data, beautifully rendered, seamlessly interactive, and mostly stable, until they're not? We do not present these stories as proof. They are invitations. Invitations to consider the possibility that the universe is far stranger, more malleable, and less permanent than we assume. That time can repeat. Space can shift. People can be copied. Physics can pause. And when they do, the seams show. Perhaps the simulation, if that's what this is not failing. Perhaps it's being maintained, debugged, tested. The glitches could be routine maintenance or signs of something deeper unraveling. Or perhaps they are neither. Perhaps they are just reminders. Reminders that reality, like memory, is fallible. And we, who move through it with such confidence, are temporary travelers in a system too complex to fully understand. Still, in the face of all this, what should we do? Should we fear that we are not real, that we are code, that we are watched? Or should we marvel at the elegance of it all, that a simulation could feel so human, so warm, so fragile, so filled with love and pain and hope? Because even if this world is made of lines of code, the moments we live inside it still matter. A floating island still inspires wonder. A looped day still teaches something. A vanished person is still missed. A duplicated self is still haunted by its original. Maybe what matters isn't whether this is real. Maybe what matters is how we treat each other while we're here, whether we are copies or originals, whether time resets or not, whether the sky is simulated. Because behind every glitch was a person who noticed, who asked, who remembered. And in a world built on code, perhaps the most human act of all is to keep noticing, to keep wondering, to keep telling the story.